So I was prompted to make a video on the Cartier Les Heures fragrances after a few exciting recent additions to my collection. I don't have every single one and I've not smelled all of them, but several of these I bought quite a long time ago when they became rather plentiful on Discounter following a bottle and packaging change. Back then, I would say testers could be had for the $100 to $150 range. So it's important to note that I didn't pay retail for the majority of these. But unfortunately now they've more or less dried up. There's still a few here and there available, but not at such great prices as before. So I really respect the line. I think it's quite interesting. It seems like they've given perfumer Mathilde Laurent a lot of creative freedom to use this line as sort of a perfume playground. And I say that because they're quite interesting and sometimes quite strange. They don't feel like commercially minded perfumes at all. In a way, quite a bit like the Hermescence range seemed like a very free playground for Jean-Claude Elena to work out his style. There's a few threads that run through that you can really detect some of the things that Mathilde is really interested in, particularly green notes, and we'll get to that as we go. But I suppose we'll just start with number one, Heure Promise. This is one of the more kind of likable, easygoing fragrances from the line. It focuses on a sort of soapy, clean iris and musk and sandalwood dry down. To me, the base of this is dominated mostly by this kind of soapy, clean sandalwood smell. The iris is a bit of a puff at the beginning. I've sprayed it here already on this blotter. It's fairly light and clean, but it lasts for a good amount of time, but it's one of those kind of light, clean, easygoing, stays close to the skin type fragrances. But as with many of the fragrances, it has a green note. Mathilde Laurent seems really obsessed with working out this very particular way of doing green. It's not the sort of ashy galbanum green of a Chanel number 19. It's not sort of a sharp, grassy vetiver green either. But to me, it's sort of this dewy, leafy green, sometimes reminiscent of like a hay or a dried green tea. But we'll get to that as we go. So this does have a little bit of these sort of dewy, almost juicy green notes at the beginning. And this, I almost think of like a blonde sandalwood, if that's a thing, but not the kind of sandalwood that has like a deep, dark woodiness to it, but a very light woodiness to it. There's a tiny bit of like a creaminess as well, maybe coming from the sandalwood or the musks, and just like a hint of nuttiness I get too. I've smelled similar types of sandalwood in dry downs of other fragrances. I believe, I want to say the sandalwood in Amouage Lyric does a similar thing to me. It's not this dusty, dark old wood smell. It's more like a new, almost soapy, creamy, very comforting smell. And another fragrance where I smell something similar is Hermès's Cabriole, the fragrance they made for children that's alcohol free. That one is quite a bit lighter, but the dry down is really reminiscent of Heure Promise. But I would probably choose Heure Promise over that just because of a more satisfying performance throughout the wear of the fragrance. Next up, speaking of green once again, Heure Brillante. This, I believe, is one of their best sellers. When I went to the Cartier fragrance counter at Bloomingdale's here in New York City, by the way, that's probably the only place where I've seen a really comprehensive shelf of the Cartier Les Heures fragrances. They stock many of them. I haven't even found as many in stock at the Cartier store. So if you're in New York City, check out the Bloomingdale's flagship on Lexington. They have a lot of these. But anyway, my point was the sales associate was really pushing this one on me, even after I told him I already have it. He still insisted on spraying it, so it must be one of the best sellers, and I can see why. It's very fresh, it's a good summer fragrance, and I did indeed wear this several times during the summer. Yeah, it's got this gin note. The green here, this is more a grassy green of fresh cut grass. It does have like a slightly alcoholic vibe that you can imagine coming from the gin or like a vodka, like a very clean, watery alcohol. It lists as well lemon and aldehydes and gin. Many of the note listings are quite short, and if you read the Cartier website, there's no note listing, but there's like a little sort of poetic paragraph that sprinkles notes throughout. But yeah, really lovely. It smells like a lemon gin cocktail. It's very, very uplifting and very bright. It has a beautiful sharp greenness that's really nice in hot, humid weather. I suppose I can't think of anything just like it, but maybe somewhere in the ballpark of Mugler's cologne, but not at all the same. We'll talk about comparison later. I hope it's obvious, but for the most part, when I compare things to other things, it's more about finding interesting threads or points of reference. It's never about one is a swap of the other or one is a dupe of the other, and I'm usually not complaining about one being derivative of the other. So I think all the comparisons in this video are just about finding interesting fragrance threads, references, context for the things I'm talking about, especially because I know many of these are hard to smell. Oh, I skipped a number, but here we go. My most recent purchase, one of the most satisfying purchases of a lifetime, number 3, Vertueuse. In my mind, it was Vertueuse, which again, in my mind, not in reality, was like vertigo, but apparently it's actually virtuous, which is quite funny. But this gives me green vertigo. This one is like Mathilde's no holds barred, greener than green. I must give credit where credit is due. Persola's put this one on my map in his blog review. This is the one he mentions being most impressed by. And I had more or less given up on ever having it, as it seemed discontinued for a while. I never found it on discounters. But recently I noticed it was available again on the Cartier website, of course full price, but I wasn't quite willing to pay that, especially for a blind buy, as I'd never found it in store to try. But lo and behold, I signed up on fragbuy.ca, not affiliated with anybody, for their in-stock notifications, and to my shock and surprise and delight, I got a notification a couple weeks ago, and I never clicked buy so fast. And wow, this is kind of the weirdest and also strongest fragrance of the bunch. I was not prepared for what this smelled like. It is really a slap in the face with a big green garden snake is what I get. The closest thing I can think of is the aggressive, sharp sourness of synthetic jungle, but even more so. It's a bright, humongous green at the start. It feels like a plant that's going to eat you alive. And underneath all that is this really funky, strange latex note. You know, latex comes from a plant, or rubber comes from a plant, and I just get this image of snapping a green stem and seeing this this like white, gooey, latex, rubbery ooze out of it. This one is listed as having, let's look it up officially, lavender, which I do get more in the base. Yeah, it says verbena, wormwood, thyme, mastic, or lentisk, lavender, rosemary. So a big herbal bouquet. I have to say, to my nose, none of these herbs pop out literally. It doesn't smell herbaceous in a culinary sense. I get almost a sour greenness, which reminds me of like a Jolly Rancher green apple candy flavor, that sour candy. That's so sharp. It does eventually calm down, thankfully, because I think that would make it very hard to wear after 3 or 4 hours, and you get more of a calm, soft skin scent. I remember thinking that the base was getting quite comforting and almost lotiony, and I looked at the Cartier website and they mentioned almond, and that just clicked for me. I thought, that's what it is. So eventually, after many hours, it settles down to a bit of like a comforting almondy sort of base. But wow, that opening is huge. It's difficult, but in the best way. It's like so interesting. It's so aggressive. It's so in your face. By far the strongest I've tried from the line. So let's continue on. I've got 3 more. So more green. See, green everywhere. Heure Fougueuse. This one again was a tester, so it came with this sad little cardboard cap. This one is more of a horsey green. So it really is reminiscent of like hay, green pastures. Let's see what they say. Magnolia, bergamot, mate, vetiver, lavender, leather, vanilla, oak moss. This one I've had for quite a long time. I think it was the first one I bought. Again, I think I said earlier, unless I'm misremembering, I think if there's any criticism to be levied against the line, it's that sometimes they feel like extremely interesting smells, but maybe not always something you want to wear as a perfume. And I think Heure Fougueuse goes that way a little bit. It's very beautiful. It's so interesting. I can't say I've smelled anything like this ever before. It definitely has a freshness and a radiance. But yeah, this strong mate, like ground up, dried green tea kind of smell. If you look at the notes, it seems like it has quite a bit in common with Heure Vertueuse, but it doesn't smell anything alike. So again, it's like Mathilde, it feels like she's really working out this idea of alternative takes on green, and we're getting so many interesting facets of it throughout the line. So that's Heure Fougueuse, also another one that's on the stronger side and lasts very well. One other point I'll make about the overall style is I feel like all of them have this like glassy, polished finish. I've talked about this with Frederic Malle, but it's in a different way. To me, Frederic Malle is very well defined, very like perfectly balanced in proportions, whereas these feel like a single smell that's like all these components have just been melded seamlessly and then polished to this like shiny marble surface. And I think what's interesting about that is it makes what otherwise could be some really strange note combinations, it makes them a lot more wearable because of that polish and that refinement. None of these are stinky in any way or skanky or challenging in the way that maybe like something more artisanal or more indie might be. They smell almost like this glass. I suppose this is an intentional reference, but like a jewel, like Cartier jewelry, shiny, metallic, not metallic literally, but just, yeah, I hope I'm not rambling on about this, but it's a sensation I get very strongly in all of these, and it's hard to describe. On to the next one. I think this is the second one I purchased, Heure Mystérieuse. This one is kind of a deep, dank patchouli, again, balanced by sort of a greenish, mate-ish note. Spray a little bit. I know I have more fragrances than I can probably wear in a lifetime, but still a little piece of me dies wasting a spray for a strip. But in the end, it's always very interesting to go back and smell all of these next to each other. Yeah, so this one is really marked by a patchouli, semi-camphorous, not all that chocolatey, but again, like with all of these, kind of takes more the herbal edge of the note, the herbal green, sort of mate type edge to it. Let's see, having trouble finding. Let me Google really fast because I like to see what notes are listed. But for a long time, I had smelled this and the next one. Maybe we'll get to that next before I talk comparison, and thought they were quite similar. So I thought 12 and 13 were quite similar. And I remember 13 being available on discount back in the day, and I never moved on it. Because I thought I'm good with Heure Mystérieuse. So let's bring it to the party and talk. So another purchase, the only one I've paid retail because it just wasn't coming up on discounters anymore, and I really wanted it this fall, and I talked about it in my fall list, Treizième Heure. I can't decide which bottles I like better. These do look more modern, but these caps feel more substantial and actually expensive. I do think the sprayer on the new one is a little bit better. It's more of a fine controlled mist, whereas the sprayer feels a little tough, like you have to depress it fully to get a spray. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, to me, it's like the same theme, but you just swap patchouli and Mystérieuse for more leather and vanilla in 13 hour. But they're the two darkest ones, which is interesting. Again, goes with the hour theme. We start out bright and light in the morning, comforting, like you just rolled out of bed. Things darken up. This is like, I don't know what happened in the afternoon. Maybe you had too much coffee and went on a bender rolling through a green forest. But these are very much like smooth evening scents. Again, fairly strange. Let's get back to talking about 13. Oh gosh, this is turning out impossible to Google quickly. Heure Mystérieuse, Cartier. Sorry about this. Don't want to restart the video this time. Okay, here we go, finally. So balsamic, see, that's a word I'm interested in, so I'm glad I looked it up. Incense, patchouli, jasmine. Yeah, so it's not particularly smoky, but I can see the incense. To me, it's really dominated by the patchouli. There's elemi resin, nutmeg, coriander. I suppose there's spice to it, but overall, I get kind of patchouli. It doesn't mention the green note, but I really get a strong sense of, again, like a dried green herb type thing. In comparison, if you look at just the listed notes as well for the 13th hour, they're very similar. Let's see if I can find this a little more quickly. 13. But yeah, the lack of patchouli is definitely noticeable here. I believe this one also lists jasmine in the 13th hour. And to me, that's more prominent, although not obvious. So let's see, Treizième, Heure review. The problem is if you type it in French, you get the French website. But yeah, it speaks of leather, holly, mate, birch, leather, vanilla, patchouli, bergamot. So patchouli is listed. But yeah, they do feel like two shades of the same thing. But they're different enough to me, they're worth having. This one is a lot smoother. It does invoke like a smooth, fine suede leather, but at the same time, sort of like a black smoky tea. None of these have a strong like incense smokiness. Again, I think that smoothness I talked about earlier prevents it from really smelling like smoke as in something on fire, but it's more of like, yeah, a depth of smokiness. I sense that the jasmine is adding a milkiness and a sort of softness that is helping to create the leather effect. This one overall a little bit fresher. Heure Mystérieuse with that amped up patchouli feels a little more dank. And I've actually found this a little bit challenging because it can smell a bit musty almost, and that dankness. But yeah, it's so interesting smelling all of these side by side because they have a lot in common, yet they're also all very distinct smells. Like you wouldn't confuse one or the other. So one last comparison I found interesting is Mathilde Laurent also created a Le Labo Patchouli 24, which several people have compared number 13 to, and I have to say I disagree. And I know everybody's schnoz gives them different things, and fragrance is very subjective, but I guess I just want to provide a counterpoint because a few reviews stated almost as fact that patchouli and 13 hour are the same fragrance. And to me, they have more differences than they have similarities. Only very vaguely, if you think of like smoky with kind of vanilla dry down, would I say they're similar, but the Le Labo Patchouli is way more obviously smoky, way more sharp. Yeah, they don't really smell the same to me at all. So I just thought it'd be interesting to point that out. Another pro tip, this is the oil sample, which I guess they give away more freely than the vial, which they make you pay for. And I've enjoyed wearing this in the oil a lot more than the regular. I think it sort of takes a little bit of the edge off that really in-your-face smokiness of the Le Labo Patchouli. But comparing it, yeah, this really, it goes into like smoked barbecue territory and not necessarily in a good way. It feels like the Cartier line would never allow anything that, I don't know, that unrefined into its world. Really interesting as I smell 13 more, it's reminding me of Heure Fougueuse. Yeah, it's like the brightness level is turned up several notches, but they smell like a similar base, just the tone has been shifted. So maybe I'll do a quick smell through all of these, just see if any more connections pop out. By the way, here's the newer box and the older box, quite a bit chunkier. Yeah, after smelling these powerhouses, number 1 is almost undetectable, but I didn't spray all that much. But yeah, really pretty, beautiful, lovely, soapy sandalwood. I'm really happy to have it. Number 3 is still loud, proud. I swear it smells like a balloon, latex balloon that's full of bright, angry green snakes. Number 4. Yeah, maybe the most pedestrian, fresh, but still interesting. And I can't say I've smelled another freshie quite like it. I'm getting right now a lot of kind of a creamy orange blossom as well, which is really lovely. And let's see, number 6, Fougueuse. Yeah, what's really, there's a real camphorous, like mentholated quality. The way you I think of like a forest floor that was wet the night before, and in the morning it's like a cool morning and you're getting that mist and fog coming up. So it has that cool, foggy forest smell. Number 12. Yeah, patchouli. The patchouli is almost going chocolatey now on me a little bit. If I didn't know better, I'd swear there's like a cacao note. Not like Coromandel patchouli because it's not that round and there's no sweetness here. I'm also detecting a little bit more of like a smoke and an incense in the far off background. And number 13, who's gone off camera. Yeah, I think this is much more warm and comforting. The presence of vanilla is obvious difference when you smell these back to back. So the turned down patchouli, the turned up presence of vanilla, and the turned up sort of presence of a leather accord. But there's also, again, something a little bit challenging and a little bit, I almost want to say animalic, but it feels like it's coming from the leather. Like if you smell a smooth, refined leather, it smells like it's been refined and most traces of the animal have been removed. Yet you still sense in some way that this came from a living creature. So that's 13. Yeah, is it redundant to own these all? I don't think so. I'm very happy with all of them. Would I have ever collected this many at retail? I highly doubt it, but if you can find some kind of discount on these, it's worth getting. Pro tip, because I do try to keep my eyes out for a sale, Saks has these online, although I've never seen them in store. And Saks is pretty notorious for sending you little 20% off coupons once a month, at least fairly predictably, if you sign up for their email. So there's a little bit off, at least, to take some of the sting out if you're highly interested in these. I've heard as well, although I've never done it myself, that buying samples of these off eBay is quite plentiful and easy and reasonably priced. I'm just not a big eBay shopper. Finding who to trust and who not to trust on eBay is just too much work in my mind. I suppose I spend enough time seeking out deals from retailers that I just don't have time left over to, trudge through eBay as another source. And I've got more than enough things to buy without adding eBay to the list. Anyway, hopefully those tips are useful if you're interested in trying these. I went to a Cartier boutique, the big flagship, and they only had a smattering of them. So it's hard to find the complete line available to try as a whole. I think one other of note that I have smelled at the Bloomingdale's counter, but I don't own, is the one, I'm forgetting the number now, it might be 2, that it's sort of a strawberry iris, and that was really interesting. It's like a powdery, yeah, here it is. It's number 2, carnation, strawberry, powdery, and iris. I only sprayed it once, so I can't speak very much to it, but I remember also finding it very interesting and not an overly sweet or immature kind of strawberry. But I remember finding the combination with like a powdery, makeup-y iris being a really interesting combination of notes. So I probably rambled on too much for now. And so those are the Cartier laser that I've got and my thoughts on them.